Okay. Sure, I can do that. So I just hit relaunch.
All right.
Robin, you want to do a quick hello as you introduce the poll?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Jane. Hi, everybody. In case you don't know me already, I'm Robin Martin. I'm the Vice President of SDMediaPros, as well as Manager of Multimedia Services Video Production Unit at University of California, San Diego. So very happy to have you all here with us today. As we normally do with these meetings, we like to kind of ease in with a little bit of kind of conversation and checking in with everybody, see what's on your minds before we bring in our regular news feature with Mark Mazonet, which we'll go to shortly, and then the regular program starting around 6 o'clock or so. So if you would, please go ahead and answer that poll there that's popped up there here in Zoom, so we can see sort of what you're thinking about 2021 so far, and things coming back more in person and all that kind of good stuff. We'll give you another minute or so to drop your responses in there.
I just responded to the poll.
All right, thank you, Vesna.
Yes, Vesna, go ahead and put your answers into the poll.
I got it in. I submitted it.
Okay,
Good,
great.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, hit submit when you're ready. Does our third question allow you to pick more than one? I don't know.
Maybe.
Let's.
I tried.
No, you've got to pick a favorite.
Yeah.
Well, I just my favorite, so.
Perfect.
Makes it easier. Yeah, good. All right, looks like we have a pretty strong opinion forming for question one already. We can see on the host side here. Looks like everybody overall is feeling pretty positive about 2021 and prospects for work increasing. I definitely share that sentiment, and it feels good to see things reopening here locally and statewide and nationally as vaccines get rolled out and cases are on the retreat. So hooray, some light at the end of this tunnel we've all been in for the past 15, 16 months. In-person events, question two, that's shaping up a little bit split right now. So yeah, I think folks are still sort of feeling out their own personal comfort level with getting back out there in person these days, regardless of vaccination status and all that kind of good stuff.
Robin, I don't see the results. What are we?
I'm looking at it on the host side. So I've got a little peek behind the curtain before Tom closes things out here, which I think we're probably ready to, Tom, if you want to do.
Yeah, I have to end the poll before the results pop up.
Yeah.
So whenever you might want to do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, I'm hitting the button.
Perfect. So now you guys should see those finalized results. So clearly, question one, like I was saying, yes, 14 folks all totally on board with more work coming our way, hopefully collectively this next year. In-person events as soon as possible, and we'll have some more news for you on that later in the program. We are definitely looking forward to putting on some more in-person programs, and we'll have some news for you on that for sure. And then some folks a little cautious about the venue. It depends on how much we can get outdoors versus kind of spread out indoors, all that kind of good stuff. So yep, more on that soon. And then one person who just loves Zoom, bless your heart, good for you. Lots of us have had plenty of it and are ready for other things too. But it does have its uses. It's much easier for us to get a hold of great speakers like Noah that we have coming up later. So it does have its strengths and times. And then finally, topics. We're looking at some writing topics. We're looking at some location topics, which would be great now that we can get back out there in person a bit. And then, yeah, creativity and figuring out what you're feeling like as we come out of this pandemic. So, and then, drones, they're going to keep making them. Somebody's got to buy them. Somebody's got to figure out how to use them in your production. So why not us, right? So awesome. Well, thank you, Tom, for running that poll for us. Thanks all for participating. Yep. And now here we are. It's quarter two. It's my honor to introduce Mark Mazonet, who is going to bring us that timely segment, those timely topics and information that we can put to use as we move ahead into this year. So without further ado, Mark, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Appreciate that. So yeah, we've got a lineup here, a number of things going on. So let's get right to that. See if you guys can see all. It's always interesting. I don't know why we've been doing this for 15 months and we still say, can you see it? Can you see it? Can you see it? Everybody there?
It's working.
Excellent. Well, here we go with news you can use for May 26, 2021. We start off with our COVID production update. Yes, our update here, COVID safety protocols have been extended, in case you were wondering about that. So this is really from a Hollywood standpoint. So what's going on is Hollywood's major production companies have and unions have agreed through June 30th to keep those safety precautions in play. These are the extensions of those protocols that were hammered out last September with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers and the key unions like IATSE and SAG-AFTRA and DGA. And really, it's no surprise as they want to keep this going until it's as safe as possible. But the AMPTP protocols seem to be requiring, or will not require those working on productions to be fully vaccinated, at least as of now. So that's kind of what's going on with that. And this is encouraging as Sony Pictures is planning a phased-in return to hundreds of employees to their Culver City lot in June, and Disney is doing the same thing coming back in July. But for those of you who are on set now and you're still troubled by wearing a mask and not having those M&Ms sitting out in the bowl for you to walk by and pick it up, you really ain't seen nothing. What am I talking about? Well, Killers of the Flower Moon is a book written by David Grant, and it's being turned into a movie. And the Killers movie is maintaining COVID protocols. What kind of protocols? Well, it's in Oklahoma, a state that is entirely open. And there, DiCaprio and De Niro starring, and it's said to have a COVID team, just a team of COVID folks, 75 to 100 people. And some days have 13 locations. And every day they get a spreadsheet of who's testing the next day and where they need to go. And it's 10 pages long. So it's, you and I are showing up for a shoot and we've got one person taking our temperature and making sure we're staying 6 feet. It's 10 pages long here. And according to their manager, their location manager, the biggest thing for them is the space they need for like 500 extras. And it's dealing with spacing, the COVID protocols and the catering. Can't imagine doing something like that, say in New York City. And they have to agree. And this is kind of what we've been saying all along. It's about extra space you need, your extra catering needs, and still saving those protocols. So that's still alive and well. It's still probably going to go through the 30th, even though our state's opening up fully in June. So just keep that in mind. Game, set, match. Is this like King versus Riggs, Sampras versus Agassi, Serena versus Barty? No, it is much, much more serious than that. It is Alexa versus the iPhone. Yes, can it be? Yes, it can be. What's going on here? Well, Film Convert, which is a company that makes film emulation plugins, performed an experiment with its Cinematch software, attempting to match an iPhone 12 to an Arri Alexa. And the color matching is kind of surprising, though there are a few more things at play here. The Cinematch is a software, understand, that matches not just picture, but camera to another. So one camera to another. So it kind of takes a LUT and does several other steps that go into that by camera emulation. Note that there are several caveats that at work, and one can poke holes in comparing the two, but well shot and exposed footage in both camps make the match pretty impressive. So I want you to kind of take a look at the demo video that they have here. Yep, and $1,000 for an iPhone and $100,000 for the Alexa. Maybe you too can be a Hollywood cinematographer. Yes, this is delivered for a news you can use segment in a video that's not as say snappy as you might think, but boy, that's pretty dang impressive for an iPhone versus Alexa with that software. So something to look at as you start getting different camera footage. How did we lose control? Yes, it's certainly every parent's lament, but that's not what we're talking about. We're on something a little different here. This was the month, right here in May, that the movie studios finally lost control of the industry. What's going on? Well, in a world where theatrical release is an option, not a necessity, movie studios are no longer in charge of Hollywood. We've reached a point where major movie studio has begun to sound like an anachronism. Certainly Warner's, Universal, Paramount, Disney, Sony, they remain premier suppliers of films. Certainly they generate billions, but the studio bosses that they occupy now a lower position on the power charts because it's no longer the movie business that drives the industry. When Netflix, had sent their CEO, Ted Sarandos, to Hollywood, he slowly but inexorably turned the streamer into the top movie and television employer in Hollywood and around the globe. So movie studios, though, used to have an ace in the hole. Hey, we have exclusive access to movie theaters, but now Netflix owns a couple theaters and Amazon is in talks to buy AMC theater chain. So studios are now likely to suffer with trimmed budgets. On the cutting block are those cushy expense reports, travel allowances, car leases, fat salaries, vanity projects, and inflated development deals. And the deal contracts are as archaic as the old lexicon. But according to Blumhouse founder Jason Blum, with change comes opportunity. So every studio is experimenting with different windows and bespoke business models. Movie theaters is where we want to see our work. And there's a bonus point if you can accurately use bespoke in your own sentence. So who remembers these wonderful ads, the wanna get away ads that Southwest had? Here's a quick glance.
General, there's been a breach. We need your password so we can lock down the system.
My password?
Yes, sir, we need your password.
The password that I use?
Yes, sir, your password.
There's been another breach.
Sir.
Right, okay. IHATEMYJOB1.
I hate my job. One.
Want to get away?
Yeah, those are great ads, the wanna get away ads. And what do you mean by wanna get away? Well, if you are Netflix and Chris D'Elia and you want him to go away. And so what are we talking about? Well, this month, Netflix released a movie called Army of the Dead in which Chris D'Elia was a co-star. That's him leaning against the post right there. Unfortunately, Chris had a few issues. And so Netflix spent millions replacing Chris D'Elia with Tig Notaro in Army of the Dead. And last summer, the comedian Chris D'Elia was accused of multiple women of sexually harassing underage girls. He admitted to having a problem, and he was dropped by the CAA amid the scandal. And the movie was already shot. Netflix director Zack Snyder wanted to replace him with comic actress Tig Notaro. And it was expensive for sure, said the producer, Deb Snyder. She put the figure at a few million. And Deb Snyder said, Netflix, though, did the right thing. They put their money where their mouth is. The pandemic prevented the entire cast from getting together to reshoot the scenes. So she had to shoot almost all of her scenes in front of a green screen with no other actors in sight. The effects team at Snyder replicated the physical spaces and camera angles of the original scenes at a studio in Simi Valley. They replaced, referencing the old footage, they had laser pointers, greened out props, tennis balls hanging from stands to approximate where she had to look. And there could be no ad-libbing because her dialogue had to sync with the other characters' reactions. So take a look at a short scene here and what some of the results look like.
We are putting together a crew for a job.
Yeah, what does it pay?
Well, if it pans out, you make $2 million for one day's work.
$2 million.
But
That's my share. That's just for me. $2 million if it pans out. 100% I'm in. Yeah.
You don't want to know, the risks or...
Why would I want to know the risks? $2 million? It's a lot of cash. Listen, I hate my life so deeply. If I had $2 million, my life would change drastically. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
you sure you don't want to know?
I I bet it had something to do with a helicopter.
Yeah,
I'm the helicopter guy.
yeah.
Yeah. Where do I sign?
That's a little sample. It's airing now on Netflix if you want to catch the entire thing. And who remembers this guy, Paul Macarelli for Verizon? You youngins may not remember that there was a time when people talked on their phones, so it was important that they could hear. So Can You Hear Me Now was a great ad for Verizon. But now it's sort of the buzzword for things like Tenet. Can you hear me now? What am I talking about? Well, something called the Nolan Paradigm. And it could be why some new films are inaudible. What's going on? The Hollywood Professional Association met this year. They addressed the subject where scenes were so underlit, the audience complained they couldn't see the action, or so indistinct that even people with no hearing problems were wishing for subtitles. The talk was titled, Is Creative Intent Wrecking the Intent of the Creative? Many members nodded in agreement with the idea that a lot of directors don't seem to care that audiences can't hear or see. Apparently, the concept of film as an audiovisual experience, not necessarily dependent on its plot, or what is being called the Nolan Paradigm, is widespread. Now, examples of the Nolan Paradigm included the undead attack scene from Game of Thrones, the final season, I think it was the 3rd episode, and of course, the soundtrack from the movie Tenet that many people have said is just very difficult to understand. Now, a solution may be something that is well known to the industry, but not practiced enough. It's kind of the notion that indistinct things seem a lot more distinct if you already know what they are. So here's a short clip from BBC Radio 4 series titled Uncommon Senses for a great demonstration of this concept.
Have a listen to this. Probably that didn't make any sense to you at all. It was degraded in various ways to sound like mere electronic glissando. So let me play you a real clip of some speech sounds.
She cut with her knife.
Now listen to that first clip again. Now you can understand it. And you couldn't before. But the sound hitting your ears hasn't changed.
She cut with her knife.
What has changed is that your brain now has a model of what it expects to receive, and it learns to hear it as speech. Let's listen to another example.
The kettle boiled quickly.
Heard for the first time, there's nothing to go on. But as soon as you know what's being said, you hear that sound organized into speech sounds by the predictive expectations of the brain.
So people in mixing or grading suites who probably have heard unmixed dialogue and seen their graded shots are very likely to assume things are a lot more audible or visible than they really are, even if the director isn't suffering the same problem, which he or she very likely is, being intimately familiar with every syllable and every frame. Now, it's for this reason that experienced sound and grading people, regardless of an approaching deadline, should do everything they can to reschedule as much downtime as possible between the end of the primary work on the project and the final look or listen before it leaves the facility. Unless your director likes it that way, in which case, hey, you learn to call it art, right? So be sure to join me next time when I'm going to talk about the app that's driving the race to the bottom in our industry. And I might possibly talk about a program that will excommunicate me from the music scoring world here in San Diego. Until then, this has been News You Can Use, May 26th, 2021.
Thank you, Mark. Robin, did you want to just finish up our opening remarks and then I'll take it over?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Jane. Mark, as always, thank you for bringing us relevant and timely information and what can only be called bespoke news items for this group. And with that, I will gladly take that challenge anytime, Mark. With that, it is my honor to introduce Jane Hare, president of SDMediaPros, to help us move on into the main portion of our program tonight. Jane, please take it away.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you, Mark. And interestingly enough, this is the second time that the word bespoke has come up in my world in the last 3 days. So I don't know what it is about that particular term, but it is on the lips of many. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for tonight's SDMediaPros meeting. I'm Jane Hare, the president, as Robin mentioned, and we're really glad that you're here tonight. This meeting has been a couple of months in the making. I watched a presentation on LED walls in January, and at the end of the hour, I was convinced that we absolutely, positively had to do this topic in 2021. One of the things that the presentation did for me was it made me aware that the use of LED walls is not just for huge studios and huge budgets. Our speaker, Noah Cadner, demonstrated how LED walls are becoming accessible to all of us, many of us. So I think you're going to find this very interesting this evening. And I think you're going to kind of be blown away by the way that the technology has become somewhat simplified. But before we get to that, I am interested in bringing up a gallery shot here on my computer so I can get a quick screen grab of our audience tonight. Can I ask that everybody who's here just quick turn on their cameras so that we can get a gallery view? I'm gonna go to full screen. All right, everybody looking at your cameras with a nice big smile. Bill Bork, are you there? Hello. All right, everybody, on 3, 2, 1. And just one more. All right, I know that's sort of painful, but it really does help us with our marketing. So thank you for that. Just a reminder that we are, SDMediaPros is a nonprofit organization and we focus on educational topics. And that's of course the point of our conversation here tonight. And I'd like to introduce our board of directors. We have Robin Martin, who you met earlier. He's our vice president. Jeff Trober is our webmaster and acting secretary at the moment. Bob Unger is our CFO. He is not here this evening. And also on the board are Kevin Marty, in charge of membership, David Rains, who is one of our technology experts, Mark Masonov, who, as you know, does News You Can Use, Tom Kinnaman, who is our streaming guy. He does everything behind the scenes for these meetings. Michael Wood is our social media expert. And I'd also like to introduce tonight, I believe he's here, Dan Cheatham, who is our latest member, who is just now joining the board of directors. Dan is bringing with him a ton of organizational experience, marketing experience, on-set experience, and he has knowledge of some topics that we haven't covered in a while, including stunts and munitions, and a lot of topics that have to do with safety on set. So look forward to those in the future, although he'll also be helping us with meetings just on any subject. So thank you, Dan, for joining us. We are very, very pleased that you are here. I'm going to turn the meeting over quick to Robin Martin. One of our poll questions tonight was about, are you ready to come back to an in-person meeting? And Robin's going to share a few thoughts about that.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Briefly, because we know you're very anxious to hear from Noah here on this great topic, and then Michael's going to kick us off here shortly. But we are all definitely in the same boat as you guys in terms of being anxious to make those in-person connections again, to be able to present content that really can't be done effectively, over Zoom. And so the board has started to work on some meeting topics for later on in the summer, again, assuming that by and large, California's restrictions get lifted on June 15th, which is the current plan. That's going to open the window for us to be able to see all of your smiling faces in person, even more so here soon, right? So some of the topics that we are looking at are some locations topics, some drone topics, so you can kind of look at some of the things that were in that poll as sort of indicators of what we're thinking about. There's some great opportunities to kind of get everybody out to some spaces that we haven't visited in a long time. as well as some familiar spaces in various parts of the county. So please stay tuned. We know, we've all been sort of sitting tight here in Zoom, wherever we're at, but the time is coming very shortly for us to get back out there in person. So stay with us, and we'll have more information on that coming soon.
Good.
Thanks, Jane.
You're welcome. We would love to see you all in person again. And we know that being in San Diego, there's some great topics here that we can do and that we believe we can plan to do safely. So we're going to start working on that in the next couple of months. Kevin Marty, can I ask you to just give us a quick update on membership?
Thanks, Jane. Just a reminder for everyone that our discount membership of $50 comes to an end on June 30th. So I really want to encourage anyone that is not a member to please sign up, take advantage of this discount membership, because when we do go back to face-to-face meetings, non-members will be required to pay $15, just like we used to, for the meeting. And our members are free. So this is a great time to take an opportunity to get that discount. And we'd love to see you. We can't wait to get back to face-to-face meetings. And so we hope you take advantage of this. And again, it ends on June 30th. So don't delay. Looking forward to it.
Very good. Thank you, Kevin. And now I'd like to introduce Michael Wood, who is one of the members of the board and who planned this evening's meeting. Michael does our social media, so you see his messaging on a regular basis, and he's the one who has managed all of the details for this evening's meeting. So Michael, take it away, and we'll get the program with Noah Cadner started right now.
Well, thank you, Jane. Yeah, so if you see anything on Facebook that's inappropriate, I'm the one to fire. So anyways, just let me know. I'm pretty excited for tonight because I am not only a technology nerd, but also love storytelling. So this intersection I'm quite excited about. Our speaker tonight has a very unique combination of his experience, very in-depth experience on set, in post, and also in the analytical aspect of the breakdown of different films and virtual productions. He has written 2 career guides now for Epic Games. He's on the 2nd volume already. So definitely, we're going to put the links in the chat. And I would probably read the first one, the first guide first, because it brings you into the space. And then the second guide really helps executives and producers understand the technology and how it's advanced for any kind of production, and so how you could step into that. And they're really well written. Noah comes with a lot of experience. He's got his own podcast now where he's diving into this even deeper with the filmmakers and the crews that are behind these virtual productions. He's an editor for American Cinematography magazine that he has gotten to interview some of the greatest filmmakers, innovative filmmakers we have, like J.J. Abrams. Many of those, he's got to sit down and talk with them. So I'd love to hear, those experiences. But he's also a co-founder of the virtual company. So based in San Francisco, he's helping Apple, clients like Apple, Sony, Epic Games, United Nations integrate LED virtual productions into their productions. So I want to welcome you tonight, sir. Mr. Noah Kendar, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Well, great to be here. This has been an awesome introduction. I'm going to try and follow up this amazing presentation so far. I'm very touched. And I guess I will remind me how much time I have. I want to make sure I get to all this crazy stuff we have to cover, but I'll do my best.
So we're going to have about 35 minutes. We definitely want to make sure that after your demo, we might have a couple questions. This is very interactive. So if we have some questions that are pressing, we'll bring them up. But at the end, we're going to have quite a few for you. So.
All right. Well, cool. Well, great. Well, let me just dive right in then. Let me launch this up and let me know how this looks. Here we go. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay. Does everyone see this little slide deck? Looks all
Yes,
right?
we do.
All right. So yeah, again, I really don't know how many of you may have heard stuff about this before, or how how in depth your knowledge may or may not be already. So I will do my very best to kind of make it universal. And I should point out, this is actually this presentation is kind of a subset of a much larger workshop that we do that's about 12 hours long. So I'm going to do my very best to just distill it down to the very good stuff. So anyways. So with that in mind, again, thank you again, Michael, for that wonderful introduction. So I'll just give you a quick look at that stuff over again. But basically, yeah, I mean, as you can see, I'm really into virtual production. I'm doing it as a writer, I'm doing it as a host of a podcast, and I'm doing it as a kind of a consultant integrator. So I really have had the opportunity to do this in many different flavors, and it's been a lot of fun. And I couldn't be having a better time doing it. So I've really been enjoying this. So just real quick, what I want to give you kind of an overview of what it is we're going to be covering today, because I know people can sometimes get a little lost and stuff. So just to give you the roadmap of what we're doing, I'm going to define virtual production, because part of the reason why I was hired to write the field guide in the first place is this stuff is kind of so new that there's not a lot of pre-existing documentation on it. Then I'm going to show a clip that has a very nice kind of history of how this stuff's been done up until now and why this new move towards LED walls is so interesting. Then a look at how virtual production was transformed and changed and updated in 2020 to 2021. Then I'm going to show you a live LED wall that's right on the other side of this room, believe it or not. I will walk over and show you. And then finally, if we still have time after that, some prognostications on what might be coming next. So with all that in mind, what is virtual production is really kind of what I want to start with, because it's one of those things that has so many loaded meanings that I think just even understanding that is a big move forward for anybody who's interested in this stuff. So at its most basic, the way we define virtual production is where the physical and digital worlds meet. So right here, you've got a still from Avatar, a 2009 movie that was one of the first films to use this term, virtual production. And essentially what it meant in that case is they were digitally capturing the movements of actors and of cameras in a volume that was just basically there to just scan their movements. And then all of that was transferred onto CG animation. So the effect is you get a completely animated film, but one that is driven by real human beings and both in both the acting and the camera positions. So, this was kind of the big leap forward, and obviously this was a huge hit. I'm sure most of you saw this one, and they're making two or three more of them right now. So, a pretty big watershed moment for virtual production. So fast forwarding, a couple about 10 years later to The Lion King. This is where the concept of real-time animation starts to come into the mix. And when we say real-time animation, what we're basically talking about is exactly what it sounds like. The kinds of work that you might have done frame by frame and making CG animation, you're waiting a very long time for it to render. It can now be done completely in real time. And so what they did in The Lion King was they essentially used a video game engine to pre-film the entire movie, to basically pre-animate all the movements of the animals, and then they went in with a very experienced live action crew and had them essentially watch the movements of the characters and then film it with real production gear like dollies, cranes, pan tilt heads, drones, to approximate the look of a live action film. And in the end, you get this very interesting hybrid of real life human movements capturing stuff that, obviously never could have existed in front of the cameras. So that's a big step forward in virtual production. It's also kind of a philosophical bent. The concept that I think many of us I'm sure very familiar with is fix it in post. With virtual production, that kind of turns into fix it in pre, because so much of what is happening in front of the camera can be done live that it doesn't have to be deferred until later on. There's kind of a what you see is what you get aspect to it. And so the traditional production paradigm where you have a little bit of work done in the beginning of a production, then kind of the lion's share in the middle of actual production, and then in even greater amounts happening in post-production. the post-production and pre-production are kind of inverted because all this stuff now needs to be ready to go in front of the camera. And so it's also, it's because it's game engine technology originally that it's been adapted to use in this way. It's also, there's a bit of the agile method of filmmaking, basically where instead of, you do one thing in this silo, one thing in that silo, and there's not a lot of crosstalk between different areas. In virtual production, the idea is that everything can kind of be happening at once. So if somebody gets a bit of, builds a bit of content or a 3D asset in one side that may be originally intended just for pre-visualization, it will then become something that's actually filmed in front of the camera. And it's also this idea that because you're able to see everything much earlier, because you're looking at it in this really high quality, real-time animation, you have more time to iterate and hopefully arrive at a better film versus, kind of this mad dash to the very end where a lot of compromises may have to be lived with just because things aren't ready until the last second. So that's, I don't, is everybody still with me on all that? I hope I got you there. Okay, good. So that's virtual production, just in a nutshell, just that crossover of digital and physical. And, one thing that that's really important to me to kind of get across is that this is not necessarily all new stuff. The kind of stuff they're doing in The Mandalorian is cutting edge in terms of the technology, but the desire to get things to happen in front of the camera, and in some cases the necessity to get things to happen in the camera and not deferred into post is not new at all. So I have this little clip I want to show that illustrates this very well. Let me see if I can call it up. Here we go. Is this it? It is. Let's see. Here we go. All right. Does everyone see, hopefully, a black screen? Here we go. I hope you can see this and hear this. If you can't, just yell out because I can't actually see you guys right now. Good?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that is an extremely protracted look at what we're talking about in the history of attempting to get these things in camera. Some of those examples were because there was no other way to do it. Others were looking for kind of more creative ways to create imagery that, would have required a lot different approach in order to achieve. So, but one more thing I want to bring up, because when I show that, a lot of people go, those are a lot of movies that are, way beyond the kind of thing I'm ever be doing. And, I don't have Lucasfilm money. I don't have Lord of the Rings money. I don't have James Cameron money. But, what's interesting and what's happening right now is a lot of this stuff is starting to kind of trickle down and proliferate. 20 years ago, digital capture was only for the very high end. Now we all have Red, Blackmagic, Arri, what have you, to shoot projects, and there's only digital capture. Film has become this real niche thing. 10 years ago, 4K resolution, again, was mostly for the high end. Now you can get it on your phone. So, all of this stuff is now is getting to the point where it's becoming less expensive, easier to put together, and you're going to start to see these stages. In fact, I'm currently writing an article that's all about how many of these stages there are in the world, and I'm counting just the major ones, the ones that are like 100 feet across ones, and there's already like 120 of them throughout the world. So this is happening. It's not happening tomorrow. It's happening right now. So, and to kind of take us a little one step deeper into what I mean by that, this stuff really.
But we're done here, I think, for now.
Hello. Sorry about that. We done soon. So in 2020 and 2021, what happened to make this even more fast to take up are two real big catalysts. Number one, the one that I'm sure everyone is very familiar with, The Mandalorian, which was really the first major production to do this kind of stuff in camera with an LED wall. Before that, it was very possible to do live compositing with a green screen, but and it was possible to use LED walls as kind of maybe a really far away backdrop, or to project, pre-canned footage. But they kind of brought it all together with real-time animation, camera tracking, and an LED wall to be able to shoot what really looks like, very impressive visual effects that you would have just expected to be done on a green screen, completely live and in camera. So, that was kind of when that came out, it really opened up a lot of people's eyes to what was possible. And now, it's literally, when I speak to a lot of productions now, this is the first thing they reference, like, oh, we were inspired by this. If we want to do something like this, that's on our radar. So that's one. Number two, as we all know, the pandemic hit, and what is interesting about virtual production is it actually lends itself very well to getting around a lot of the stuff that is sort of the restrictions of the pandemic. Because this is game engine technology that powers this, it in its very nature is designed to be used in a very remote, multi-user, environment where it's not necessary for everybody to necessarily be in the same room. And also, because LED walls can essentially bring any location in the world into a very controlled stage that can be extremely carefully controlled and run by a minimum of people versus a giant set or, a kind of a location shoot where you got a lot of variables. That is what, really pushed things forward to make a lot of people realize this was the only way that a production could be accomplished. I'm just talking there's a Netflix series that just started production in Germany, a huge miniseries that's all set at the turn of the century called 1899 that was going to be shot, kind of Game of Thrones style all around Europe on location. And they at kind of middle of 2020, they said, can we do this all on a stage? Can we make a giant, Mandalorian style stage and make it look like we're on ships and in the rain and, do all that on a stage? Because that's the only way we can really see to make this happen safely and continue with production. That's what they did. So, again, this is an example of a multi-user session where everybody's in their own home and they're actually creating animation. This is from another Netflix series, an animated series whose name I am not sure on, but what you're seeing in this image is you're seeing the DP looking at, the imagery that everybody else is able to look at the same time. You've even got in the lower left corner, you've even got an actor who's doing movements with a motion capture suit, and he's animating the character that everybody else is observing, and they're making a movie right there. And they never met, and they were never in the same location at all. And again, it's the pandemic kind of really created this massive need for a reduced crew footprint and the possibility for people to dial in, to a stage, whether they be across the street in a van or, across the world on the internet. And it went from, the studios went from, we're never going to allow this. We don't want our IP to be out there. It's too much secret stuff. Everybody needs to be under the same roof. We're not going to do this, to, sure, let's do it. And, it's looking like that is not going to necessarily completely go back to the way things were before, because a lot of it worked a lot better than they thought. So, just to say that is what has accelerated all this stuff, and kind of, in observing this for the past year and a half, that's really what I'm seeing, is that it went from something that was interesting and was being done at the highest levels to something that's being done kind of everywhere now. Like if you watch the Super Bowl this year, a good chunk of the Super Bowl commercials were shot all on one stage in Florida, using this exact technology, and they were ones where they looked like they were up on mountains or they were driving around cars or any of that kind of stuff. It was completely done on stage for a good chunk of these commercials. So this stuff is really taking off. So all that said, I just want to show real quick what this can look like at the most modest of scales. So any questions so far? I know that's a lot to lay on you, but before I go into this live demo, I just want to make sure that I haven't missed any key stuff either from the chat or if anybody have anything.
I mean, we got some that I think that we'll hold off, but I think one of my questions, I think, besides the pandemic, what do you think really helped push us into bringing the price and the virtual productions into reality, you know, outside of the pandemic? Would you say it was a couple of the filmmakers that launched these films and was successful at it? Or would you say that it's just technology and the evolution of it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Hollywood is a very, you know, there's a lot of planning that goes on in Hollywood. And of course, people always want to get the maximum amount of content up on the screen for hopefully the least amount of money. And when they saw, you know, that it was possible to produce something like The Mandalorian, which, you know, previously probably would have been twice as expensive because there'd just be so many people working on it and so much post-production and, you know, so much time and effort spent to just get it to the level that people expect of the Star Wars name. You know, they just it just opened a lot of people's eyes. And yeah, I mean, the technology has gotten cheaper and cheaper. I mean, it's still not what I would call dirt cheap, but you know, and I'll show after we look at this demo, I will go through a little bit of some of the main components and kind of give you a ballpark idea of what these things cost, because it's like anything else. I mean, it's definitely an investment, but you know, everything I'm going to show you is just a scaled down version, scaled way down, but you know, scaled down version of what you see in The Mandalorian, which is, you know, a $25 million soundstage. And what you're going to see next is in my living room. So it's it definitely scaled way down. Okay, so without further, so I don't know if I answered the question. That was kind of a long-winded answer.
Yes, you did. Thank you, Noah. Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing your demo.
All right, so let me so I'm going to go in the other. So let me switch over audio. Okay, so now I'm on a wireless mic. You still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Sounds good.
All right, so literally, I'm about to walk into the room behind me, which is the living room. I'm in the dining room right now, if you can believe it. But what you're going to see is the living room, and yeah, I will just go over there. I showed these guys a little preview of this afternoon, but I've actually changed it up, so this hopefully will be a surprise to everybody. But here we go. Does everybody see this?
Yes, nice.
Yes,
nice,
your beautiful living room.
Okay, that is my living room. That's my living room. Let me walk over there. So here I am in the living room, doing my thing, and yeah, I mean, so now you are looking at one of these stages. So I am here on a virtual production stage, but again, it's my living room.
Wow, you balanced your hand really well on that virtual chair.
Oh yeah, you ain't seen nothing yet. Watch.
I love mixing the background and then foreground, and it really marries the whole thing.
So what you're looking at is LED screen right there. Oh. Live in the camera, obviously coming right through the call. A real chair that happens to be kind of sort of aligned with the scene. And this is all live animation, 3D animation. And let me just show you real quick. And I'm being lit with just two lights is actually what's lighting me. And they're actually in sync with the screen. But let me see if I can show you real quick what the stage itself looks like. Does everybody see this?
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
So this is what I see in the room. A very small setup. Again, a screen that's approximately 8.5 feet tall by 12 feet across. I have two lights like this guy, and and a fairly beefy gaming computer driving all this. And you're seeing the live signal as I pump it in. But we typically capture stuff in here in RAW, And so there's a lot more opportunity to color grade it and stuff like that. So let me show you one more thing. We looked at this or actually we were talking about looking at this afternoon.
So the camera is going into the gaming computer, and it does in fact get married, if you will, inside that beefy gaming computer.
No, you are seeing the live feed. Like just to help.
Okay,
get your head around it.
so we're just seeing your camera hooked up to Zoom.
Exactly.
And
So
it's just shooting a background.
Exactly, it's shooting a screen. So I'm behind the camera now. I'm still on. Hey everybody. So if I move this guy around.
Oh, okay. Wow, the illusion is that good.
Wow.
I'm going, oh, that's all inside the computer. No, it's literally
in your room.
Yeah, it's powering the monitor back there. Giant monitor. What's the pixel pitch? Is there a term for the density or the resolution?
Yeah. So this is this is what we call a 2.5 millimeter screen. So it's if you were in the room, you might be able to see this better on the other stage, on the other camera. Let me see. So yeah, I mean you can almost see it has a little moire pattern because this other camera has a much wider lens and is, I think it's like it's a Panasonic GH something or other, so it's not particularly. The main camera I have is a Blackmagic Ursa G4 with a nice compact prime lens on it, so that gives me a lot tighter depth of field. But on these kinds of lenses, when things are everything is sharper, it kind of gives the illusion away. But yeah, essentially it's 2.5 millimeters between each of these little dots on the screen. And this is a screen that's made up of individual little panels. They literally just pop right out. It's 6 panels tall. Each panel is about 1.5 feet. It's 6 panels tall and 8 across.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. So a little bit of good depth of field in a high quality camera, and the background shifts out of focus as you would expect it to.
Exactly. And again, this is, they talk about the minimum focal distance that you want to put a subject in front of one of these screens is about 9 feet. I'm just barely there. Like, here I'm literally like touching this screen now. And, when I walk into where the focus is set, I'm kind of right here. So, you can see I don't have a lot of leeway in a room this size, but it's enough to do stuff.
Yeah.
And let me see if I can actually pan this around. Hold on. I have a little game controller. Let's see if it's going to work. It's been twitchy today because, sometimes Windows gets a little funny. Let's see, is it working? Okay. So yeah, this just to show you this scene is actually live. Of course, it looks a little weird with the chair still there, so I'm going to take the chair out. But I can essentially position my virtual camera anywhere I want in this scene, and get a new setup anytime. So
who is building these 3D environments?
Well, you can find these very readily. So this is what you're looking at is Unreal Engine. That's the name of the software, and it's free actually. Well, that's kind of the exciting part is this is completely free software. Of course, they don't give you the screens or the camera or the cameras or the lights, but the software itself is free. And this is kind of interesting. If you look at my face as I'm panning around this scene, the lighting is kind of slave to it to match. So as I go into the darker areas, I have less light. If I cruise back into some part that's really well lit, you'll see.
Now, how is that happening? What's talking to the lights, or is it talking to your camera? I mean,
I have. So it's pretty simple. Well, I say that I've been messing with this for a year, but so essentially the way it works is on the computer that's driving this content. It has an app that just looks at the entire screen and then tells the lights whatever part of the screen I want to be the same color or intensity of light. So it'll not only do, like if there's a flickering source, it'll do flickering. It picks up their color, their intensity. So, and with 2 of these, and you can actually see it better.
Are they RGB lights or?
Yeah, they're RGB lights. Let me see.
Okay, so RGB. So you've got to have an RGB light that DMX. I mean, what exactly? What's the plug?
They're DMX exactly. So as you can see, like as I as I kind of move around in the scene, that light is doing its best to match.
So those are flat panel RGB lights.
Exactly. They're just one big LED.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's amazing about what RGB lighting can do. It can give you any spectrum and create these flickers, etc. Interesting.
Yeah, what's cool about this is obviously, as a camera operator, there's a bunch of cool things about this. As a camera operator, I can see this, so I can line up the shot. I can tell if the lighting is working. As an actor, I can react like, oh, the fan's over there. I think I better turn it off. And if I were shooting a scene with this, everything I'm shooting, instead of getting a green screen shot where a bunch of stuff has to be done in post to it, every shot is basically a ready to use visual effects take. So there's just a lot of benefits, and that's what's driving this stuff. And it doesn't just have to be 3D material. Let me see if I can call up an image, some footage. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Now it's more of like, this is 2D footage, but you can see it's the same thing. Like the lighting is matching, as I'm walking around in here, the lighting is the same, is taking its cues off of this screen again. So, as cars go by with their red taillights, I'm getting hit with more red light, and on this side, I'm seeing more headlights.
So the interface between the lights and the computer, a Dmx controller, then what's connecting the Dmx controller to the computer?
So I have a little box. All of this comes from a company called Entech, and it's actually very inexpensive stuff because it's originally kind of for theatrical lighting.
Right.
And so there's one box that goes USB to DMX. That's like $200, and then the software that connects those two and tells it what to do with the lighting. Like just to give you a sense of what the lighting is contributing.
Yeah, a lot of us are hands-on people, so we're going, how do I do this?
This is what it would look like if I had no lighting. This is a single. This is the difference. So that's just to give you a sense of what the lighting is contributing. Just two lights is giving is adding a lot, I think, because without them, I'm basically silhouetted against this backdrop.
Well, the fact that they're reacting with the background is making all the difference.
I'm dying to ask a question here.
Go. Go.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Hey, this is Jim.
Sorry, Jim.
I noticed the only, especially like with the Mandalorian stuff, the amount of lumens was so crucial when you were against the background that it illuminated you as if there was a bright source behind you. When you're standing there, you got nothing. You got no separation, zero. Is that a factor of the illumination of the wall?
So you're saying that? Well, oh yeah, I haven't added more lighting.
And if you were really there, you'd be really backlit.
Oh yeah, no, you could definitely. I mean, this is a very basic lighting setup that we use for kind of kind of setting things up. But yeah, I mean, you could very easily hang more lighting up on the top of these screens that would tie into the screen as well if you wanted to have nice rim lights on stuff. Absolutely.
So one more light is a backlight, and you'd have yourself a good feel all the way around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what I'm saying is there a brighter version of it that would give that? Because you should, instead of adding lights, you want the actual video wall to be your backlight or whatever.
Right.
Light.
Right. So what you can do in that, I mean, you can absolutely
put like output. That's all.
Yeah, you can add more screens in the ceiling. You can add them on the sides. Those can be spotlights. Like these are very much like good overall even lights. But we're thinking of bringing in like some airy orbiters to add a little more punch, more Fresnel-like lighting for doing things like backlight. But yes, we have thought of that, absolutely. Okay. Oh, and one more thing before I forget. Another piece of this, which I'm not showing in this demo, but if you look up in my ceiling, you can see I've got tracking dots in there. And what those are for is essentially to connect, if I want to be able to do like dolly shots and tracking shots where I'm moving across the 3D scene and have the scene shift in perspective to match, then I need some way of telling the engine where the camera is in the room so it can then draw the corresponding move so that things look like they're, you know, really moving together. I mean, my screen is so small when I pan and tilt on it, it kind of looks right anyway, just because it's so tiny. But if I wanted to do a shot where I'm like following somebody, you know, 10, 20 feet across the room, you know, I'm going to want to turn on tracking.
Wow, we got a lot of comments in the chat, a lot of people asking, and I think one of the big questions, I think Jeffrey was talking about cost. I mean, that's pretty much, you know, we want to find out at the end, but also one of the other questions that came up in the comments is, are the LED lights included with this setup, or is this something that you have to add on to the setup yourself?
RGB lights.
Yeah, no. So I mean that's kind of, I mean, people talk a lot about secret sauce around this kind of stuff, but and there really isn't. I mean, everything that's in this room, we kind of figured out just reading a lot of different posts on the internet and looking at YouTube videos, and you know, me talking to a lot of people for my guides and for the podcast and for American Cinematographer. But it's the secret sauce is it's very bespoke. I've never seen two setups that are exactly the same, but you have some basic components. And if you want, I can show the next part of my demo, the next part of my presentation is kind of the components that go into it and kind of give you some ideas of cost. If everybody's ready to check that out. Okay.
Yes,
all right.
Definitely.
Awesome.
All right.
I've been wanting to make a nice game computer.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and this one we're waiting to replace the GPU on this one because it's getting a little long in the tooth. We've had it for about a year now, so these things change so quickly. All right, so here we go. So components of the LED wall. So yeah, again, just to reiterate, there is a lot of variation in the way people are doing this, and you know, it's. But there's some basics that are kind of bedrock to it. Number one, you need something like a real-time engine, unless you want to just do driving shots where you're showing, you know, video footage as your backdrop, and you don't care about being able to do like a complete, you know, dolly moves, boom moves with a tracked camera. You can absolutely get away with, you know, we've literally projected footage from YouTube as like 4K footage that we found just for tests, and it looks fine. So. You know, but if you do want to be able to do stuff where you're building sets from scratch and you're doing, you know, 3D camera moves, then you need Unreal Engine, and that's like I was saying before, it's free. So if you go to unrealengine.com, it's completely free for download. They actually just released a new version of it today. And
is it PC only? Of course.
No, it actually. So I mean,
But you need to put it on a PC, right, to have the horsepower.
Yeah, I mean the version that's for Mac is missing a lot of the key plugins to really do this right. So you know,
I don't think you'd be able to beef up a Mac enough to be able to do this. I mean that's what PCs are for, sheer power.
Yeah, I mean it will absolutely run, and you can look at environments and you can test stuff and you can develop them. But you know, when it comes time to actually project them in front of a camera, yeah, you need like you don't need a crazy machine. This what's running this is an off the shelf Republic of Gamers like desktop PC that's, I want to say, maybe $5,000. So you know, it's not crazy. You know, you're not talking about workstation class computers at all. Although you can certainly get those if you want. But yeah, so Unreal Engine is really the big, you know, the big piece. And what's cool about it is you don't even need LED walls to do this effectively. You could absolutely develop environments in Unreal, and you know, if you have an 80-inch OLED monitor, you could be shooting close-ups easily with it. You know, you could frame it up enough to where the monitor was beyond the edges of the frame, obviously on a tight lens, and you know, you could make that work. But you know, again, if you want to do this kind of stuff where you have it on a set, you're looking at LED walls. And I've seen people even do this with projectors, but you know, again, the cool thing about LED walls is they're more emissive. You don't have darker areas that can tend to give away the effect because everything is, you know, one consistent quality and intensity, and it's just, you know, it just gives you that sort of look that I think people are going for. And you can see it, for example, in the way this one's set up. They've got kind of a curved thing going on with their set piece, and they've got a ceiling, which kind of gives a lot of that natural emissive light that just makes things look like they're real and outdoors. And the cost of those really have gone up and down. I mean, basically what you're talking about is like a big mosaic of Lego tiles that you put these screens together with. And they, basically any variation of 1.5 feet tall by 1.5 feet wide, you can make as many squares of that as you want. Ours is kind of I would call the minimum size because it's just under 9 feet. So it's going to be taller than most people, especially me. I'm like way shorter than that. So I work out great on it. And then, it's width-wise, it's enough to frame up at 16 by 9 kind of setup and not see the edges of the frame unless you want to, which you typically don't. And so these screens, again, the kind of setup I have in here 2 years ago would have cost you $1 million just because like the screens were so new and so expensive, but now they're becoming more and more ubiquitous. This is more like a $40,000 setup, which again, I understand is, not cheap, but if you think about this being installed in like a studio and working every day for producing content, it's not that different from buying a nice camera, in the long run as an investment. So that's kind of the big piece. The rest of it, many of you may already have the equipment you need. It's, what I'm shooting with in there is, an Ursa Mini. It's like I want to say $5,000 camera, 4K camera with $3,500 lenses on it. So it's not, we're not talking about an Arri Alexa like they use on The Mandalorian, and you can still get, absolutely usable results. Camera tracking, this is something you're getting into when you're taking this to a slightly different level where you want to be able to do tracking dolly, boom kind of moves, and you want to see the environment shift to match. That's what they do on The Mandalorian, obviously, all the time. This can get a little more expensive, although there are ways to do it. There's a virtual reality headset from HTC called Vive that will actually let you get away with doing this to a usable level for like $800 or $900. So, again, it's when we say it's coming down in price, it's like the professional solutions, like the ones they use on Mandalorian, they're a little more expensive, but you can absolutely get camera tracking for a lot less. And then again, lighting. I mean, these lights I have in here, I have 2 of these light matte spectrum LED panels, and they're $5,000 each. So with 2 of those, I have, enough to get my base illumination. And then, yeah, if I want to work in stuff like some backlights or whatever, it's just kind of building on top of that. And what's cool is they all can be connected together with DMX. And I don't have to slave them to the screen. I can do it the way that's set up where they're driving off the screen content, but I can also I can animate them if I want to, like their intensity, their color. I can pretty much ramp it up and down. Now my slide says questions. So I know we've been doing questions all along. But if anybody has anything else, the only slides I have left at this point are a few more about my speculations on where this is going in the future. But I don't know how to do it on time. But
yeah, no, we'll definitely get this. We got a few more questions in there, and then we'll dive into the speculations of the future. After those questions. So Jeffrey, he was asking about the cost. Did you have anything else, Jeffrey, that you wanted to know about the actual cost of the package, at least for his setup?
Yeah, I have a travel TV series, and I loved what you just showed me with what looked like London buses. And, that would be an awesome thing because we have footage from all over the world, and we can take, an episode that was 10, 15 years old and then do kind of an updated version, add some stuff to it and make it fresh again with, the way things are now using, a scene that's kind of timeless, like maybe Yosemite, let's say, or a national park, which we're known for, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So I wonder, I know that's a little less sophisticated than what the setup was you just showed us. How much do you think it would cost to get the kind of lighting and stuff like that for a setup, a more simplistic setup like that, do you think, all told?
Well, what's going in this room that's, if I'm adding together a computer and I'm adding together screens and lights, I want to say it's maybe, and camera, you're talking about maybe 60, 70 grand, but it wouldn't need to be that big. And there are other lights you could get. These light matte spectrums are pretty sweet. I like them because they just put out an enormous amount of light, and they're very light and they don't make a lot of heat. But any any off-the-shelf light that will accept DMX controls could be used. So, I know there's quite a bit of lights that you can get that are, considerably less expensive. And, I mean, these ones are like made in California, so they're a little more pricey than probably the equivalent you could find if you went for a little more, bargain stuff. But yeah.
Dan, Dan is getting ready to go, but Dan was asking about the lights. Dan, if you're still here, was there anything else you wanted to ask about the lights before you run off?
I was just noticing that if you have someone in the foreground, that may be a different type of lighting that would be separate from the lighting that is computer controlled, that would literally be manually controlled according to what the director would be wanting to have in terms of front lighting for that particular person. That seems to be a different perspective. All the rest of the lighting is approximately shoulders backwards and how that reflects on it. The actual front lighting is not reflected in the picture necessarily, except that is a three-dimensional world, I'm assuming. But you don't actually see what's actually in front of the person who's looking at the camera. And I was thinking, well, how would that all work in this? This would be up to the director to still increase lighting to the actors in front. And I was also thinking that the perspective of that rendering in relationship to the perspective of or the size of your actors in the screen has got to be key to making it look realistic or not realistic.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
those are my only thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you're seeing in there is me kind of futzing with this for 5 minutes before this presentation. And I can set in the virtual camera, I can choose different focal lengths and different perspectives, and I can set the camera's height anywhere I want. Right. So, absolutely, if you're taking the time, you can even throw up a grid and just really make it perfect so that the perspective of the room at a particular lens, focal length, and what's on the screen match perfectly. And yeah, the light, I have, because I'm doing this as a one-man band and I don't have a person I can just call out and say, give me a light that matches the screen. I have it all set into kind of automatic mode. But yeah, absolutely. I can have a mixture of lights that are completely disconnected from DMX that are just manually, being brought up or down. Tweaked. I can connect. I can tell the scene where a light physically is in the room, so that if I did want to see the lighting coming from the opposite side of the scene that I don't see on the screen, I could absolutely do that too. There's many different ways that you can send out the commands to these lights, to tune it to exactly the sort of look you want. So yeah, all that is absolutely possible. Yeah.
So thank you, Dan. And Vanessa, we got your question, and Rob also. One question we had from Robin about power. Definitely, I think that's an important, maybe, about 5 years ago, but I think it's important for our houses if we're going to install this. Robin, can you explain your question a little bit more so we can answer it for your specifications?
Sure. Just was curious if these are all coming off of like a single circuit. If there's any concern when you're getting multiple panels, if you've got an array of 24 there that are all pulling an amp, then you're gonna flip a circuit. So sort of what's the ballpark that we're playing with?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, it's a funny story. This was supposed to go into a soundstage. My wife runs a production company, and this was supposed to go into like a real soundstage, and it was meant to be built in April of 2020. And there was a moment where we just were like, you know what? That's probably not going to happen. That stuff's going to sit in a warehouse for like 6 months or a year, and we're never going to get to do anything with it. And so why don't we just bring it to our house and see what happens? So that's what we did. We had him bring it here. We literally, over this course of like 3 weeks, built this thing up from scratch. But before we looked very carefully at the specs on the screens to figure out how much additional power there was. And we basically figured out there was about an amp to an amp and a half per screen, depending. And it's interesting because the brighter they're set, the more amps they're drawing, because they're literally like lights. So if you're showing a dark scene, they might just be at 10% of their capacity. If you're showing a pure white, this scene, which has a lot of bright areas to it, they might be closer to 100. So we ultimately did realize we needed at least 80 amps for the whole screen. And each screen actually has its own power supply. So we put in 4 20-amp circuits in our living room and kind of subdivided the screen so that each circuit was never getting more than 12 or 14 amps. And that's worked like a charm. We've never blown a fuse. We've never tripped any GFCIs or anything. And, we've run this thing. We've done some scenes where we have it as just a pure white psych at full blast, and we've never even had any problem with it. So it's definitely something to consider. You wouldn't just want to plug one of these things into the existing wall outlets. You want to think it through, but we didn't have to put in any kind of, other than just more circuits, we didn't have to add anything special.
JT, you got a good electrician that could, do some install for us?
No, I don't, but I have it. Wait a second, hold on. You got me off mute? But I do have a tip for the generals out there. When you're working in a location that's unsure of and you're worried about power, check the kitchen. The disposal is always on a separate unit and it's switched on the wall usually. You unplug the disposal, plug in your light, flip the switch, and you got a separate 20.
Wow.
How's that for a tip for the day?
That is a hell of a tip.
Wow. Well, no, thank you. Definitely thank you for the tip. Thank you, Robin. The next question we have, I think, is one of the really important ones. And I think, Noah, you'll go into it a little bit with your end slides. But Rob, you're talking about, is green screens dead? Can you elaborate on your question for us, please?
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks so much. Super cool stuff here. I think like a few years before, I think the LED wall conversation was coming out, we were seeing that real-time rendering with the green screen walls becoming like a popular thing. And now it kind of seems, why would you do that when you have this? So I'm just curious if you can talk about the pros and cons and maybe a difference of where someone would maybe use a green screen wall, maybe more post-production heavy there versus seeing something in real time. We're more creating the environment here versus, what a green screen might do, or I don't know. I'm just curious on your opinion about that. And if, will we need for a green screen anymore?
It's a good question. It does come up often, that exact topic. And the shorter answer is yes, you'll still need a green screen. The longer answer is it depends. And what it depends on is what the shot is. Like I just did an interview with the visual effects supervisor for Paramount, who does all of the Star Trek series that are currently shooting. There's 2 in production. Well, there's 3 actually. There's Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Discovery, and Star Trek Brave New Worlds, which are all shooting up in Toronto. 2 of those are shooting on one of these stages. They built a stage that's about 70 feet across and 30 feet tall. And they're shooting a lot of the stuff that they would have built like a set for a planet or maybe gone on location to shoot. They're capturing in that volume now. And I asked, are you guys completely done with green screen, blue screen? Is this going to just be everything? Like it seems like you pull this, maybe, you park this in front of the bridge and you kind of could just shoot all day long. And he's like, well, the reality is for some stuff, like for the stuff that's supposed to look like it's on location, this is a no-brainer. For something that's, the view screen, it becomes a little more complicated because sometimes there might be really complicated choreography that needs to happen that we haven't even figured out yet, where it's, spaceships dogfighting and the crew's supposed to do a certain thing when something blows up, and, to get all that synchronized on a screen might ultimately be harder than just capturing it in a green screen. And also they have so much overlays. Like if you've ever watched that show, there's always like some little readout that goes over the view screen too, like it's like a hologram or something. So, they're like, that's going to be a composite no matter what. So, we know we're already going to do post on that. So in that case, it's because there is so much more work in getting stuff ready for the camera. We're still going to be doing those shots on green screen, but who knows? In the future, as more and more people get good at creating content for this and shooting it and becoming comfortable with it, you might ultimately see green screen go away. I mean, it seems like, if you're doing the weather, this would be a perfect example of where green screen may give away to something like this, because it could be a very modest screen that, finally the poor weather person could actually see what they're pointing at instead of kind of like, they always have that kind of an over here because they can't see it. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of what I've observed so far.
Yeah, no, I think it did. And thank you, Rob, for your question. So we do have Vanessa. You had a question for Noah.
Yes. For the production part, how much does it cost to get the equipment of the camera set, of the tripod, and of the green screen. How much does it cost altogether?
You know, that's a good question. Like I'm literally figuring that out every day because the short answer is it depends. We've experimented with many different cameras and computers of different kind of budgets. I can tell you, like, if you get onto one of these with an iPhone, it doesn't quite work because the iPhone just has so much focus that it sort of sees the screen and you can see the pattern of it, which you don't want. But the cameras that we have on here now are $4,000 or $5,000 cameras, and we've even shot stuff with little like Sony Handycams that have big decent sized lenses that are maybe $2,000 or $3,000 that work as well. So it just all this stuff is getting cheaper all the time. So I'd say it's as much camera as you can afford, but probably there's a way to pull it off without breaking the bank. I hope if that answers the question.
Since I am a part of a program, it's called Options for All from a media program. Our camera, we use C100 cameras.
Yeah. Actually, we were shooting something here last week with C200s, which somebody help me. I think those are very similar Canons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they worked great. I mean, it really came down to, like, when we tried zoom lenses, they didn't look so great because zoom lenses will show more of the scene very sharply, whereas lenses that have just one focal length will tend to have a easier time of making the focus really shallow. So, it's totally doable, I would say, with those kinds of cameras. Definitely.
Well, thank you, Vanessa, for your question. And I think one of the things that's, Mark on his question is sort of in line with yours, but on the rental side. So, Mark, can you ask and get about your rental cost question?
Right. I've seen some of these walls, advertised for like around 10 grand, for like kind of a 10 by 8 kind of size. I've seen people rent them. I've heard of, and then there's of course the studios like yours that you can go into, Noah. I'm not sure that, where are you located again?
Up in San Francisco.
Okay, so I don't know if there's anything in San Diego yet, but I know LA's got a bunch of them, obviously.
Oh yeah, LA has a bunch,
right.
For sure.
So anything in San Diego yet, or what would the cost be for something simple like what you've got there?
I mean, we've started. I mean, we just did it. It's interesting. We've done quite a few virtual productions. Virtual down to the core, where we've either got one actor in the volume and we're like in this area, which is kind of sealed off from there, and we're just completely remotely running it, and everybody else is in a Zoom call, like directing and making changes to the lighting and all that kind of stuff. And we just did. A week ago, we just did a one with more people in person, and like a kind of a corporate commercial kind of thing. And we weren't charging much. We were charging them like $3,000 a day, and that was to have the stage, me kind of supervising it and making sure that everything was kind of running, and and then they brought their own DP and they brought their own cameras, and so I'm thinking. These setups will become ubiquitous pretty quickly, but there seems like there's a lot of demand right now. I mean, as you mentioned, like LA has got a huge number of these really big ones, and I've heard quoted rates for the really big ones as high as like $30,000 a day. But that's 10 people to run it. Obviously, this is something small enough that one person could run. So it just depends.
So the size of yours is what now?
It's about 9 feet tall by 12 feet across. I have the exact number in millimeters because of course it's all this
okay. I was just wondering, and is that something you purchased? I mean, that's a video. Is that a traditional video wall like the ones they use outdoors?
It's the same technology. What's changed is that the space between, like, if you go see a ball game, it's very obviously a screen. You'd never mistake it for like real life just because you can see the dots. So what happened, and this is why this wasn't being done as little as 5 years ago, because they just couldn't make the dots small enough to fool the camera's perspective. But they've kind of miniaturized. So this one, like I was saying before, this is a 2.5 millimeter pixel screen. So, if you can visualize, 2.5 millimeters is that's how big the individual dots are, and that's enough so that if you're not focused directly on the screen, it looks like a solid piece. But they're down to 0.5 now, and I'm sure they'll go smaller than that. And at that point, you can literally focus on the screen and you still won't see the pattern. It's small enough to where it just looks like continuous surface.
So was yours tiles, like the 1x1 tiles that they then the seam is so tight that you can't see a seam? And if that's the case, then what was your wall? What did it cost you to build that one?
So again, this is a wall that was purchased over a year ago now, 2.5 millimeters, and the panels, I think we talked them down to like $1,200 a panel, and there's 48 of them. So what is that? 12 times 48. I want to say it's around 55, 60 grand, something like that. But that was a year ago. Like I know these panels are now under 1,000 each, the same exact ones, and there are better ones that are more dense. But I mean, I think for a lot of purposes, you kind of get away with something like this, and nobody would really be able to tell the difference. I mean, sometimes when we shoot this stuff, you can typically see on a decent monitor if you're seeing the pattern of the screen. That's what you want to avoid, because obviously that causes you some problems that you got to fix in post, where the screen pattern is kind of distorted. But I'm noticing that less and less the more practice we take with it, and I'm sure with a slightly more dense screen it'd be even less so, or a bigger screen. That's the thing. The further you can be back with your camera, the less that's an issue, because the camera just can't resolve some detail that far away. So it's definitely. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's this stuff is taking off for all of these reasons, because it's gotten easier, less expensive, and the results kind of speak for themselves.
And is it portable?
So I'll give you an example. So this one's 48 panels. It took myself, my wife, and luckily a cousin that had been visiting us for months and had kind of gotten in under the storm from the pandemic, about a week to put it together. But we had never built this kind of thing before, and we were getting help from the manufacturer, but I mean, still, it was physical labor. And this one is actually, so there's two kinds of screens that they make. There's what they call the rental model, which is really meant to be popped apart and like assembled super quickly by one person without tools. That is, designed for like road shows and concerts. And then there's this one which is meant, it's cheaper, but it's meant more for like a permanent installation, where it might be like in a train station at an airport, or a stadium or something, where it's not intended to be. I mean, we could take this down, but it'd probably take us a couple days to pack it up carefully and not damage it. Whereas the rental ones, like I built a screen literally this size because we had a sidewall for a while. I built that exact size with the rental one. I built it myself in 3 hours with no tools. So I mean, it just depends, what the application is.
Thank you.
Can I jump in here real quick? I had a chance to work with an LED wall in the month of April. We were doing a studio, we were doing a location shoot, let me put it that way. And we rented a wall from a local San Diego company. It was 42 panels, and two guys were able to set it up with all of the rigging in about 4 hours. And then we did some testing. They brought the video switcher that we could use for the source material. Did the shoot the following morning and then tore the whole thing down. The pricing that I had on that was just under $8,000, which I don't know how that might have been discounted or how any of that happened. I did not do the negotiation. But just sort of as an example, it was able to be, they brought the LED screens in a series of cases, created the structure, plugged all the LED screens in individually, connected everything, and we're up and testing in the 4 hour period so that we could make sure that all of our playback was working well. And then it really looked fabulous. It was really cool. So if anybody's interested, I could share. I don't necessarily want to do it since we're recording and putting on YouTube, but if anybody's interested in more information about who we worked with, I could give that to you privately.
Yeah.
And I was gonna also add to that. We had a similar setup about 6 months ago here at the studio. Similar size wall. It was a rental too. So I think Jane I think there was a heavy discount for it, but I think if I remember correctly, it was like 6,000 and it was like a quarter of the regular price. So 6,000 times 4 was, I think it was a 12 by 10 wall. But it was the much larger pixels though. So
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten to the point where, you know, I think it's getting a bit, unless you literally need it once, I think it's getting to the point where it's becoming more and more affordable, you know, as an investment. If you have a need to, you know, shoot kind of this sort of content where it might have been a green screen and it might have been a lot of post-production in the past, and, you know, it's something you could conceive of offering as a basically live service.
Well, I know that we just had a shoot with the Coast Guard a couple months ago. We had rented the video wall. It was about $8,000, but it was pretty big, and they had to hoist it up. Patty was doing the presidential teleprompting for the Commandant, and then the company that rented that, we had got them the deal as the subprime, and they went ahead and they decided they're going to buy a 10 by 100 foot video wall, and they're down in Chula Vista. So if anybody needs a big video wall in the future, because they're not going to have it for another month, but they can configure it in any size they want. But it could go 50 by 50 or 100 by 10. You know, you do the math. Like Noah was saying, they come in panels, and this is going to be the brand new one, so I'm sure it's going to be up to date. So if anybody needs that information in the future, because they're going to rent it and move it and set it up like what Jane did. They can move it into a warehouse, which is what they're set in. They'll have it set up in there. Maybe as a, you know, if you want to bring your clients to Chula Vista Studio, but it's not meant to be a studio. It's a rental place, AV company more so. And I can help you with that, get you the information, and you can contact these people, and hopefully they'll have it within the next month or so.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, and I think Rob has a great question, but I think it's a good time to sort of look at the future of it. From your perspective, Noah, and see if that answers Rob's question, because he's getting in the future of, you know, where is our industry going, you know? So please definitely let's get some of your insight of where we're going to be going beyond where we're at right now.
All right, so I will show you my last, let's see, I have 4 slides left. Here we go. All right. So, and of course, this is my never to be humble opinion based on, you know, speaking to a bunch of people who are doing, you know, I've talked to everybody who shot or did visual effects for The Mandalorian. I've spoken to those guys many times, and now I'm speaking to productions like Star Trek, like this Netflix 1899 show that are in production now, and kind of hearing, you know, what it sounds like starting one of these in the middle of the pandemic, but also envisioning what it's going to look like when they're done. And, you know, it seems like over and over again, I'm hearing this lament that the genie is not going back in the bottle. You know, that everything that they learned as far as being able to do a lot of this stuff remotely, and that, you know, necessarily having 100 people on a set just to create these kinds of spectacular movies is not going to be a thing anymore. It's not to say those people aren't going to have jobs anymore, but it's going to say, if you want to work on a production in the UK and you don't feel like flying to the UK, and your job is one of the kinds that can be done remotely, and a lot of this stuff can be, like, I was on the Star Trek show, I was hearing over and over again that, like, some of the people that are controlling the screen itself are not anywhere in Canada. They're, like, in the UK controlling, you know, the content on the screen, and all that is doable through, you know, they're obviously using more secure content networks than Zoom, but, you know, it's the same principle. So that's kind of one thing I'm hearing. And, you know, as I don't think I need to tell this group, because I can see everybody's got their game going pretty well, and I'm impressed, but, you know, streaming infrastructure is going to become more and more of a thing. You know, I haven't done anything on this stage that I didn't have at least, you know, 2 or 3 people dialing into on a Zoom call or a Google Meets or a Teams or what have you. And so and you know, I consider our setup in here to be pretty basic. It's I'm sending the camera into a switcher. Obviously, I'm on a switcher on a decent camera, and, you know, I have a witness camera for the studio so people can kind of see what's going on. But having that, you know, ability, I think, if you're offering any kind of services, is going to become more and more important. And I think just an expectation. And, you know, this is kind of fun. Virtual production is constantly gaining new superpowers. You know, the software, it's just kind of an interesting day to be having this conversation, because the software that does all this, Unreal Engine, just got updated to its most advanced version this morning, which has a lot of cool stuff like this one feature called Metahumans, which is what you're seeing in this image. And basically it's just an extremely simple way to make very realistic looking humans that move very realistically. I mean, and I'm not a 3D artist by any stretch of the imagination. I know just enough to be dangerous, but I had no problem making a human being that looked extremely realistic that could then, be moved around in a way that looked, pretty close to the real thing. So, it's interesting to be part of this stuff because it's just accelerating quicker and quicker every day. And it's cool stuff. And on that note, there's more of an inclusivity kind of implied by that because, again, in talking to all the folks that are doing this right now, that's what I'm hearing. It's like they're no longer saying like, oh, we want the best person who lives in LA or the best person who lives in London. It's like we're looking for the best person, period. And if they need to dial in and it'll work for us, let's just do it. So, you're going to see more opportunity that isn't sort of geographically, based, which I think is cool because hopefully you will see better productions in the end because they'll get the best artists that don't have to necessarily show up anywhere to do their thing. That's basically it. If you want to hear more of my insane ramblings, please check out these virtual production field guides because there's hundreds of pages of interviews and, looks at all this stuff. And if there's anything I can help, if I can connect you to anybody in those guides or give you more suggestions, like I said, we've been helping schools a lot lately. Like we helped Chapman up in Orange County do a modest but nice enough to do student work LED wall about 2 or 3 months ago. So I'm happy to help anywhere I can. It's like whatever I can do. To me, this stuff's fascinating, and it seems like an interesting corollary to filmmaking, and so. Anything I can do to help you out with that, search for me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect anytime.
Hey,
Yeah, we put
Noah.
LinkedIn's contact in the chat for everybody. So you can find them on LinkedIn, reach out to them. And I think for us, whatever level production, I mean, we could try to figure it out ourselves, but if we can find somebody like Noah, just to help set up our productions or explore what level we need, that's going to be, you come with that experience that would make my day much easier. And I'll still get to, I think Vanessa had another question. And before we get to that, we did have one more from Rob. But before we did, I'm quite interested in this industry. I know that it's grown so much, Noah. What would you say, what's the demand and what kind of roles are in demand for this industry? Because it's exploding. So there's plenty of people that are looking at coming into film and video. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a good question. So what they're looking for right now are people who know how to drive this software, but they don't necessarily want people that only know how to drive this software. What they really want are people that have a traditional production background, because as a couple of people have pointed out during this production, it doesn't necessarily look perfect out of the box. Like, I'm just playing around with my game controller to give you something to see. But if I were doing, if I were producing some real content, I'd be very carefully lining up the scene, making sure the lighting was perfect, taking my time to really do it right. So, what people are looking for are talent who has that eye to be able to spot what doesn't look perfect, because the video game engine will draw it any way you tell it to. But, to be able to turn around and say, you know what, that doesn't look right. The perspective's not wrong. The perspective's wrong. The lighting's not quite right. It doesn't look believable. So, I encourage anyone who's interested in this stuff to try Unreal Engine out, because it's kind of fun. I mean, it's like it comes with a ton of built-in content. Like what you're seeing here, this scene here, the architectural visualization scene is like a built-in demo. Like I didn't have to buy the scene, rig it, or do anything. It's like, literally, I wouldn't know the first thing about how to build this kind of scene from scratch. But, it's like, this is a scene you can absolutely edit. In order to make my little chair work in the scene, I deleted a chair that was in the original scene because it looked like weird, because like my chair was on top of another chair, so I just got rid of it. But it's very easy to get into, and if you have that, if you can say I have tons of production experience and I know something about the software, you're automatically kind of on people's radar right now, because there just aren't enough people to fill these productions that are just launching every day.
Well, we have a few more minutes, and we still got to get to Vanessa, but I think Rob's pressing question, I think, is definitely pushing the boundaries. Rob, can you ask your question that really dives in deep for all the theory behind this?
Sure. No, you covered a few little points that kind of answer my question, but I guess a watered down version, we have motion tracking, we got the deep fake technology that is pretty insane as well. And then the LED walls. I guess short question is, how long till this all becomes just a video game, kind of where everyone's more focused on the computer software and things like that? Is that going to reach that point, or just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, is it all going to be 100% fake at some point?
I mean, in some ways, we're kind of there already. I don't know. I'm hoping we won't all turn into Ready Player One, although I could absolutely see that it's going to be possible very soon. I mean, when you look at the Lion King, the 2019 Lion King, that is a video game that you're basically watching very talented people who played a video game to make that movie. I mean, that's literally what they did. So, I mean, I think real life human actors are always going to be sought after in many ways for many kinds of films, but you're definitely going to see more and more hybrids. When you look at like I was talking to the person who works at Digital Domain, who does all their digital human technology. I just finished that podcast up, and that person did like Thanos, and he did like Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. And it's like, they're using this technology now because what they are looking for is ways to be able to see that on the set. It looks super cool in the movie, like how cool Thanos looks, but what they see on the set is like a real actor wearing this like giant, face mask on top of their head to try and approximate the height. But the other actors are kind of, doing their best to not giggle at it because it looks goofy. But they're able to use this technology to be able to see things, much more close to how to look in post. And so, there may come a moment, and the same technology that is running this scene that I have is also what runs Fortnite, the video game, and many others like it. So, there's definitely a convergence coming. And it's an interesting ride to me. I don't know where it's going, but there's a lot of fascinating ways that it could go. So.
Well, thank you, Rob. Vanessa, for your question, do you have a real quick question before I hand it over to Jane?
Yes. Since I wanted to be a DP cinematographer, is there a way that I can have some resources on how I can actually have my own independence on how I can actually produce my own films?
Yeah, I mean, drop me a line. I can give you more hints, but if you start with this software, I mean, if people are absolutely making movies with just this software, and it's cool because it's very user friendly. I mean, basically you're playing it like a video game, and you can come up with stuff that looks pretty high end. And again, I don't think it takes that much effort to learn. It's a pretty user-friendly software. But yeah, no, drop me a line anytime. I mean, I don't know if you're on LinkedIn if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to point you in the right direction on other stuff. I mean, there's many ways you can do this stuff, and it's all. I mean, you can shoot footage for this stuff. You can be capturing it with your phone. You can use your phone as like a virtual camera and direct the scene. In Reels. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. For anybody else that's on YouTube or in the meeting, Noah's contact information is in the link below for LinkedIn, or just search on LinkedIn. You'll be able to find him. His profile's got all the virtual walls all over, so it's going to be hard to miss him. Definitely thank you, Noah, for your time, your expertise, and your knowledge today. I think all of us were pretty excited to you're giving us now I got much more to think about tomorrow in my next production. And so if you're not getting a lot of calls, there's going to be a lot of other system administrators, integrators that will be.
Oh, yeah.
So I thank you, sir, for your time. I appreciate it. Jane, I'm going to hand it over to you. Do you have any questions before you wrap up for Noah?
Well, I guess I have a real quick question for you, Noah, about pre-production. Speaking as a producer, you sort of mentioned the whole idea of fix it in pre. So as a producer, even director, what should we be thinking about in advanced planning for when we're going to be filming on an LED wall?
So, so what's cool about this, and obviously this it depends on the kind of production. If it's, although it's funny, I keep using the example. If it's two people sitting in a room having a conversation, maybe not. But I mean, I'm sure we've all been in productions where you forgot where in the scene you're like, oh my God, did we get the close up of her saying this line? I don't know where I am. So, I mean, what's fun is you can use this exact same tool to plan everything. I mean, what they do on The Mandalorian, and again, not to use that as an example too much, but it's just the first one there is. So of course it's very ubiquitous, but what they do in The Mandalorian is they basically make the episode entirely in the game engine first. They motion capture the actors, they record their voices. The director is sitting there with like a version of a camera kind of lining every shot up. And they don't bother to go to the volume and actually shoot it until it works as an animation. They're basically like their post-production is as long as their pre-production. And when they're filming, they're essentially just going shot by shot based on what they were planning from the beginning. I mean, when you're doing these kinds of very complicated effects movies, you don't want to wing it too much. You want to have as much of a plan as you possibly can. So, and what's cool though is that the same assets you're using for that pre-planning, that pre-visualization, are the same ones that end up on the wall. So it's like everything kind of gets reused nicely instead of you have to start over again when you want to actually shoot. So, I think if you really lean into this as not just a technology, but a workflow, you can do some amazing stuff.
Great way to look at it, leaning into it as a workflow, and actually making a lot of decisions and revisions on the front end. You're going into the filming absolutely kind of pinned down and ready to go. Thank you, Noah. This has been fascinating. I learned so much beyond what I had heard you talk about just a few months ago. So absolutely such a pleasure to have you here this evening. Thank you. And to everyone who's here in our audience, thank you so much for being here. Our next meeting is going to be on the 4th Wednesday of June, which is Wednesday, June 23rd. Just checking my calendar over here. Wednesday, June 23rd is our next meeting. Topic to be determined, but we are intending that meeting will be a Zoom meeting, even as we're talking about possibly switching over to some in-person events as we get a little later into the summer. So thank you everybody for being here. Connect with us on social media and we will see you again soon. Thank you and good night.
Same with you, Jane.
Good night. Thank you, Vesna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. Appreciate your time.